I had a really scary experience just 2 weeks ago. It all happened on a Thursday night as I got home from work. Up until that point, it had been a pretty typical day. I got up, went to the gym, came back home, got ready for work, and then headed out. I worked a later shift that day, so I wouldn't get off until 7 p.m. Work went by as usual, and then I drove the roughly 15 minutes it took to get back home. After arriving back, I parked my car in the driveway and got out. I currently live alone in a 2-bedroom house on half an acre of land. I walked up to my front door and went inside. After getting inside, my plan was to change and then make something to eat. I only had made it halfway to my bedroom though, when I heard the doorknob turning to my front door. I stopped where I was and suddenly had a bad feeling. Obviously, I wasn't expecting anybody to come over. I started to turn around and walk back. Then, whoever was there started knocking on the door. I walked back over, but was kind of suspicious. When I got within view of the front door, I carefully looked out of a window. There was a man standing there on my front step, and he was right against the door. I didn't want to answer it, but he kept knocking. Then I heard him yell something. I didn't know who this guy was. Maybe he was at the wrong house. I thought about answering the door in case that was true, but the way he was aggressively banging on the door caused me not to. I stayed there just a few feet away, hoping that he would leave. He demanded to be let inside. Then he said my name. I couldn't believe that he knew who I was. I was positive that I had never seen him before. I yelled to the other side as loud as I could that I was calling the police if he didn't leave right now. However, that didn't seem to have much of an effect. He stayed there and kept banging on my front door. I also noticed that he had parked his car right in my driveway. I got out my phone to call the police and dialed as quickly as I could. My heart was racing and I told the 911 operator the situation. My biggest fear was that the man would try to break in somehow and get in my house. At almost the end of my conversation on the phone, the man stopped and I noticed him running back to his car. Then he got in and drove away. I watched closely and made sure that his car left my street. I felt a little bit better and told the 911 operator this new information. They sent an officer out anyways, so that I could tell them what happened and stuff. After that, the guy was still gone, and after looking around a little bit and talking to me, the officer left as well. It was a little bit scary being home by myself that night, and I had a difficult time trying to go to sleep, but eventually I was able to. I woke up the next morning at about 7 a.m. At first, I had forgotten about the craziness of the night before. I made my way to the kitchen though and passed by a window. I happened to notice a car parked right out front by the driveway. It was the same car as the night before. The guy was back. I noticed that he appeared to be inside of it. I didn't hesitate and I called the police immediately. I told them that the man had returned. Then I carefully watched out the window. For a couple of minutes, the man remained inside. I watched him open up his door and leave the vehicle. He made his way up to my front door again. Then he started knocking. I couldn't believe this guy. I still didn't know who he was or what he wanted, and I didn't know how he knew who I was. He stayed at my door, knocking every so often. I went to the back of the house. After maybe 5 minutes, the police got there. When they did, the man tried running away. He wasn't able to make it that far though, and was caught by the police. When he was questioned, he didn't even reveal how he knew me or what his reasoning was. All he would say was that he just wanted to talk to me. He claimed that we were old friends, which was not true at all. I'm just glad that I noticed him that morning. I think that he followed me home from work the previous night, and I simply hadn't noticed. When I walked to my front door, he must have followed, but was a little ways back. This was one of the scariest experiences of my life, and hopefully I never see that guy again. Last year, I was at home by myself one night. I live in a smaller house in a quiet neighborhood. It was probably about 10 o'clock at night when I heard a knocking at my front door. Obviously, it was strange to have somebody knocking on the door at this hour. I walked over and looked out the window to the front door. I saw a small woman who appeared to be 25 to 30 standing there. I had never seen her before and was not sure as to what she was doing here. After thinking about it for a few seconds, I decided to answer the door. I opened it up and the woman said hi, and said that her car broke down on my street. She said that she was just down the road. Then she said that she knocked on 2 of my other neighbors' doors and nobody answered. I asked her if she had called her roadside service, and she told me that she couldn't get any signal around here. I looked over in the direction that she had pointed her car was in. At first, I didn't see anything. I asked her where exactly her car was. She told me to follow her and asked if I knew anything about cars. I actually did. I wouldn't call myself a car expert, but I have fixed a couple of things on my own cars a few times. I've always had an interest in cars and how they work, and I was curious. I asked what she thought happened to her car. As we were talking, she started walking back over to it and said that her power and everything in the car just started going off, and then it died. I followed her down my driveway and into the street. When I got onto the quiet road, I saw a little ways down, a car was parked on the side of it. It was what looked to be a fairly new Honda CR-V. The location the car was parked was past my next-door neighbor's house. After his house, the road curved, and there were no houses for a little stretch and just woods on both sides. We finally got within maybe 15 feet of her vehicle. I noticed that the windows were tinted very dark. The woman walked over towards the driver's door and unlocked the car. It was that very moment when I saw the back 2 doors opening to her car and 2 men getting out, 1 at each door. I was only 10 feet away from them. The very instant that I saw them, I turned around and sprinted as fast as I could in the opposite direction. There were 2 of them and 1 of me, and I had nothing to defend myself, so I wasn't going to stay there. I heard the men starting to run after me. I didn't even know that I could run as fast as I did when I was going back to my house. I somehow got back to my front door and was able to get inside and lock the door. Probably less than a second later, the men reached it and tried going inside. When I got inside, I wasted no time finding my phone and calling the police. Unfortunately, the men left within a minute and were gone. By the time the police got there, everybody was gone. I told them everything that happened, but did not get the license plate of the car. I gave a description of the people, but the car is pretty common and I really didn't get a good look at the men at all, so I don't know if they were ever located. At the end of the day though, I'm just glad to be alright. I came within seconds of who knows what. I feel kinda dumb for being set up like that, and I'm more suspicious of people now. This is something that happened when I was a kid. I was probably like 12, and back then I would ride the bus to and from school every day. My parents both worked until 5 and would get home between 5:30 and 6. But I would get home at about 2:45 to 3 p.m. from school every day, so usually I had a few hours by myself. One day, the school bus dropped me off at the end of my street like every other day. I walked on the sidewalk until I got to my house and then went inside. My after-school routine was usually to go to my room and try to get my homework out of the way first. Then I would relax and do whatever I wanted until my parents got home. This time, I did my homework on the kitchen table. As I was doing it, I remember looking outside the window and seeing a man walking out front on the sidewalk. He walked past our house, and I didn't think much of it. We usually wouldn't get too many people walking down the sidewalk, but an occasional person wasn't a big deal. But I later saw him walking by the other way again like 10 minutes later, and he kind of looked over. Still, it wasn't a huge deal. The kitchen was at the front of the house, and after I finished my homework, it was probably like 4 p.m. Then I moved into the living room and turned on the TV. Just a few minutes later, I heard our front door opening. Now I knew instantly that it probably wasn't either of my parents. I'm not sure how I knew that, but I just had a bad feeling. They were rarely home that early, and when they were, they would usually let me know. Then I realized that I forgot to lock the front door when I got home that day. I jumped up off the couch and didn't know what to do. I ended up going right behind the couch to hide. I had no time to go anywhere else. The person walked inside and was in the kitchen for about a minute. Then I heard their footsteps moving closer, and then they entered the living room where I was. My heart was beating like crazy. There was a little bit of space between the couch and the walls behind it, and that's where I was laying on the carpet. I couldn't see anything and my head was down. And now that the person was walking on carpet, I couldn't hear their footsteps anymore. I tried my best to be as silent as I possibly could. The seconds felt like minutes. I didn't hear anything and was afraid that whoever was in here knew that I was there. But then I heard footsteps again in the kitchen. The footsteps soon moved to the stairs, and I heard the person walking up. I was slightly relieved, but there was still somebody in our house. I thought about hiding there until the person left, but when they reached the top of the stairs, I realized that I could probably leave. If I got up and ran now, I should be able to reach the front door before the person could. I couldn't really hear their footsteps anymore now that they were upstairs, so I didn't know exactly where they were. I carefully got out from behind the couch and stood up. Then, as quietly as I could, ran for the front door. I opened it and went outside. From there, I ran down the street to one neighbor that my family was pretty good friends with. I knocked on her door, and luckily she answered. She let me come inside, and then she called the police. It was great to finally be safe again, but the person was still in my house. The police response time was really fast. They were there within probably 5 minutes. My neighbor and I watched from her window when they got there. They soon entered our house and searched it. Unfortunately, the person was gone. I went back to the house with police, and everything was in order, except for my bedroom door upstairs, which was open. That gave me an eerie feeling. Then, not too long after, I found out that the police had found a suspicious man in another neighbor's backyard. When I saw what he looked like, it was the same guy that I had seen walking on the sidewalk earlier. I couldn't believe it. He later admitted to being inside of our house. My parents got home a short time later, and the police stayed for a while talking with everyone. Soon they left though, and things got back to normal for the most part. That experience made me not want to be home by myself for a while though. It also made me remember to always lock the door. I live by myself in an apartment. I live on the second floor of what I would say is a pretty standard apartment building. There's 4 floors total, and the building is very long, with straight hallways on each floor. It's fairly close to the city, maybe like 10 minutes away, and in a decently populated area. I've lived here for about 2 years now, and I like it a lot. But there's one thing that happened several months ago that made me question moving. It was an ordinary night, and I was home alone. My apartment has 1 bedroom, and then a living room, kitchen, and bathroom. I was in the living room, sitting on my couch and watching TV. I don't remember the time, but it was a little bit later at night, probably after 10 p.m. I had only gotten home from work about an hour earlier. As I was sitting there, watching TV, I heard some noises. I thought that it was coming from my next-door neighbor's apartment. That's what I assumed, and I didn't pay it much thought. Some time went by, maybe like 30 minutes. Out of nowhere, though, I had a really weird feeling. It's hard to describe, but I suddenly became uncomfortable and started to look around. When I looked over my shoulder, I saw my bedroom doorway that was only about 5 feet away. There was a man sticking his head around the corner of the doorway, looking right at me. We made eye contact, just for a split second, before he quickly ducked back around the corner. I got up from the couch and in a panic, ran directly out of my apartment. I couldn't believe what was going on. Some random guy was in my apartment. After getting out into my hallway, I didn't really know what to do. I wanted to call the police, but soon realized that I left my phone inside on the couch. I thought about driving away, but I had also left my keys on the counter. Not knowing what else I could do, there was one person who lived in my building that I was friendly with. It was a woman named Courtney who lived down the hallway. I went to her door and knocked. Unfortunately, she didn't answer. She was probably sleeping because it was pretty late at that time. That's when I decided to try to go back into my apartment just to get my phone and keys. Maybe the guy either left or was hiding, or maybe I had just imagined the whole thing. It all happened so fast, I was even questioning myself if I really saw it. I felt like I was going crazy. I mean, I didn't know how on earth this guy would even get in. My apartment door was always locked, and I didn't think I forgot to lock it that day or anything. When I got back to my door, I finally got up the nerve, and I opened it. My plan was to quickly run to the couch, grab my phone, and then run back to the door. On the way there, grab my keys right up off the counter. It would probably take me less than 10 seconds total. However, when I opened up the door, the first thing that I saw was the man standing in my living room and facing me. I shut the door just about as fast as I had opened it and sprinted away. I ran down the hallway and to the stairs, and then ran downstairs until I made it to the first floor. Then I left the building. I couldn't get to my car because I didn't have my keys, so I walked out to the sidewalk that went along the road. I walked along that road until I saw a gas station that was open. When I got there, I went inside and asked the clerk to call the police. Then I waited until they arrived. When they got there, we went back to my apartment. But when we got there, the man was gone. They searched all around the building and in my place. He had stolen my laptop, my wallet, and a couple of other things. My phone was still there, but probably only because it had fallen between the couch cushions and he didn't see it. I'm not sure if the man was ever found. My best guess to how he got in was by somehow getting onto my balcony. I had a small balcony, and it would be difficult, but not impossible, to get to it from the ground level. The door to the balcony was closed, but I never locked it. He must have entered there when I was at work. I didn't really think that anybody would get to it from outside. Since that experience, everything has been good. I haven't had any break-ins or attempted break-ins. I got a new laptop and credit cards. But I still wonder how that man chose to go into my place. Did he watch me before or something? I don't know, but I will never forget seeing him that night. This happened back when I was younger. I believe that I was about 14 at the time. I remember it pretty well, and it all started on a Friday night. My parents were going out of town to go to a wedding that I was not invited to. I didn't care though. I found weddings boring and would rather stay home and play video games. My parents left on Friday afternoon after I got back from school. I was sort of excited to have the house to myself for a little while. My mom let me order a pizza to be delivered that night, and I got it and then watched TV in the living room. Maybe an hour into that, at like 8 p.m. or so, there was a knock at the front door. I didn't know who it could possibly be. I felt a little bit nervous as I got up from the couch to go check. I looked out of a window and saw a man standing there. He was not a neighbor, and I didn't know him at all. The man was wearing a black jacket and like a winter hat. He also had a slight beard. There was no way that I was answering the door though. He knocked again, and I just stood there waiting for him to go away. I was pretty confident that he couldn't see me from where I was. Eventually, I saw the man turn and walk away. I was a little bit creeped out, and I didn't know who the guy was or why he came to our house, but I figured that was that, and I went back to what I was doing. Maybe 30 minutes to an hour later, I decided to go up to my room and play some video games. I went upstairs, got in my bedroom, shut off the lights, and closed the door. Then I got in my gaming chair and put my headset on. I had a pretty good setup in there and really enjoyed it. Probably 30 minutes into that, I was interrupted though. I heard a knock on the door, but it wasn't the front door to the house. It was coming from my bedroom door. My heart started racing like crazy instantly, and I became as scared as can be. I didn't know what to do. Very quietly, I got up from my chair. Then I turned the TV off. Now it was completely dark in there, and I could see very little. I was kind of expecting the door to just open, but it didn't. I got down on the ground, careful not to make any noise. My gaming chair was sort of in the corner of the room, away from the door. My closet was half open and just a few feet from me. I crawled over there quietly and careful not to make a sound. Then they knocked again. Somebody was right outside my door, and I figured that it was probably the man who had knocked on the front door earlier in the night. I was able to crawl my way into my bedroom closet. It was not that big of a closet, but enough space for me to fit inside of it. Plus, my room was pretty messy. As a teenager, I had clothes and stuff laying all around the floor and basically a huge pile of clothes in my closet. As I went inside of it, I carefully covered myself in clothes. In the middle of doing this, I heard the door start to open. I froze and just hoped that I was not visible. I did not hear the guy walk inside, but could tell that he was in there. Then he took a couple of steps inside my bedroom. I was terrified and held my breath. He was in there for maybe 30 seconds. Then he turned and left the room, and I heard him walk out. I had just gotten a cell phone at that point, just a few months prior. I got it out and quietly dialed for the police. I was sure to make it so the guy couldn't hear me wherever he was. I whispered to the 911 operator what was going on and then hung up because I was worried that the guy would hear me. He was still upstairs, but I couldn't tell where he was. I went deeper into my closet in case the guy came back. He didn't come back in my room though. After waiting for what felt like a really long time and not hearing anything else, the police arrived. I left my closet and bedroom and saw that the police had actually caught the man. he was back downstairs, and I was told that he had been hiding in the basement. I hadn't heard him go downstairs at all, but then again, I was under a bunch of clothes in my closet. It was a huge relief. My parents were called and told about it, and they ended up coming back home that night. They got me and made me go to the wedding with them anyways because they didn't want to leave me alone. I didn't really want to be alone either. That was probably the craziest night of my life, and I will never forget it.